All righty. We're going to do a quick audio check for our new panelists. So Persia, you on? Mike Sprayberry?
I'm here.
Hey, how you doing, Director?
I'm fine. How are you, ma'am?
I'm great. Thanks for coming.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Tom.
Jeff Thomas?
I'm here.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Yourself?
I am doing great. Director Hastings?
And I'm here also. I may have to be responsive to some issues going on with disasters in Alabama today, but it's great to be with you.
I'm very pleasantly surprised you're even here today with everything going on. So thank you so much.
I think every one of these states is dealing with
yes.
something. Thank you very much.
Of all days. All right, great. So let's start with our state perspectives and regional and cross-sector resilience panel. Our moderator today is Persia Payne-Hurley. And Tom, I know you wanted to personally introduce Persia since you know her very well. So
yes, and I'll keep this brief. Persia and I work together, personal friends, and it's just great to have Persia and Jeff, Brian, and Mike on. And this will be a really good perspective. If you're new and you're in the private sector, you're going to hear how these states work together to help private sector solve their problems and how they benefit from working with private sector. It's really an interesting model that it's kind of the future of emergency management, in our opinion. So let me introduce Persia. Persia is the creator and developer of the North Carolina Business Emergency Operations Center. This is the first BEOC in the nation. It has over 1,000 corporate business partners integrated in the state emergency response team, working with state and local government before, during, and after disasters. Many of our private sector folks on the previous panel are part of that. In her past life, she was on disaster response teams in the insurance industry and is retired major from the U.S. Army. She graduated from the University of Illinois and the Army Command General Staff College. Persia lives in a beautiful, tropical, sun-drenched Durham, North Carolina. That's Persia's notes, not mine. With her husband, 2 children, and a disaster-ready Yorkie poo. Very good. Persia, thanks for hosting, and take it away.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's a thrill to be part of what promises to be, I know, an amazing discussion. So, as Tom mentioned, our topic is state perspectives on regional and cross-sector resilience. We're going to pay particular attention to private sector involvement in events at the state level, the experiences of our esteemed panel during 2020, and their pearls of wisdom are going to fall on us, as well as their lessons learned, strategies for success with working with the private sector before, during, and after disasters. So I promise you the absolute best show in town. We have a star-studded lineup that would sell out any concert venue for emergency managers. I know you guys agree. For private sector crisis responders, business continuity professionals. So come one, come all. So with us today is the Executive Deputy Director of Pennsylvania Emergency Management, Mr. Jeff Thomas, Alabama Emergency Management Director, Brian Hastings, who is always a joy to have, and the Director of North Carolina Emergency Management, Mr. Mike Sprayberry, who also happens to be the best boss in the world. So you got that tidbit free of charge. Welcome, directors. We appreciate
Thanks,
you.
Persia.
Thanks, Persia.
Hey, we're thrilled just looking at you, just seeing you. I've got some questions for each of you, and then we're going to broaden the subject a bit and allow you to answer a few takeaway questions, make your own comments, some of the things that you're dying to share with us and we want to know. And finally, if there's time, we'll go to the virtual chat from the audience and take a few of their questions. So my intent is to glean every ounce of wisdom I can. So let's jump into it. I'm going to start with the best boss in the world. Sir, this is Mike Sprayberry. If you didn't mention it, if you didn't hear me before. Sir, you're often asked about the private sector program in North Carolina, what we do, successful steps, ways to begin, best practices. I'm going to ask, how has the BEOC factored into North Carolina's resiliency during the pandemic? And what is your perspective on working with the private sector?
So working with what has happened under your leadership, Persia, is that we've been able to operationalize, the business EOC. And so over the years that you've been here, I guess the last 6 years, we've been able to incorporate the private sector into everything that we do. It's just another piece. It's like I have an operations section, I have a logistics section, I have an infrastructure section, I also have a business EOC section. And they're both physically and virtually part of the EOC here. And honestly, I didn't give you a whole lot of guidance when we first started, other than, we both agreed, I think, that as we move forward, that we were not going to go out and solicit help from private sector. Our aim was to tell them, what can we do for you? What do you see of value from, the state emergency response team? And I think that was the right approach, because Persia, I know that you right now, when we have events, you have conference calls with your partners, and basically to keep them situationally aware of what's happening during that event. And everything from the weather to different resources being moved around. And so I know that's one thing that you do. The great thing about you, though, I got to tell you, is that, when I'm performing as the state emergency response team leader, I'm not really thinking about the business EOC that much, because I know you got it covered. We have a lot of stuff going on, and you're making, I trust you. I made sure that you were a direct report to me. I trust you as making good, solid decisions in the operation. And so basically, if you do have a question, I know that you feel like you don't have the authority to answer, you'll bring it to me. But typically you're driving on with gusto. And so, that's kind of how we got the business EOC started. And I will tell you, at the beginning, I think that, we thought business EOC, it was like, what can we get people to donate and things like that? It's not like that. And so they do help us out, and we try to be good partners and help them out. But it's really extraordinary, because we find issues during every event that we just can't figure out how to solve it. But I'm going to tell you something, the private sector, they know how to solve it. And so everything from during the pandemic, we have a corporate licensed care company, and they say, listen, if you run out of space in hospitals, what we can do is sharpen our pencils within our facilities, and we can make sure that we can carve out some wings here and there so that you can place patients in those rooms, in those beds. And so we've not had to do it, but the fact of the matter is they stood up and, stepped up to the plate and said, we can do it. Just an incredible, I heard on that video talking about the energy sector. We're tied in tight with the energy sector. We're tied in tight with Walmart, so many of the others. And so the banking associations. Just tell me to stop when you want me to, Persia. And I may not be hitting the marks on what you wanted me to, but when we started, we just wanted to sort of build good communications and make sure that we were enhancing resiliency throughout all the sectors, especially, obviously critical infrastructure. But it's grown so much. You heard her say that, or you heard somebody say, I don't know if it was her or Tom, but we've got over 1,000 partners now. Incredible. And so, and we have annual tabletop exercises which I lead the tabletop, and and we ask them questions and sort of run through scenarios. So I know that we're going to have a lot of good discussion here, and I don't want to hog them all. So back to you, Persia.
Hey, thanks, sir, and I appreciate that. I want to swing over to Director Thomas, please. The Endeavor program in Pennsylvania. Groundbreaking private sector program, a lot of unique qualities. Can you talk to us about how Pennsylvania has built resiliency, sustainment, and just the overall magic of the Endeavor program?
Well, Persia, I appreciate that you call it magic. It is, it's like the blind squirrel. It could be all luck, who knows? But so far it's working really, really well. So, I tell this story every once in a while, and I'll tell it for the great partners that are on here. You have to be realistic, especially if you work in government. Those of us that have been around a while in government realize that government, you get to a certain level and you're not there forever. That is just the reality of the way things are. It's not good or bad, it's just what it is. So many times we have started and stopped and built programs based on individuals or based on governments trying to lead a program. Listen, if we've learned nothing else, we're not the best at leading programs. I just say that in general for government. The private sector is usually a little better at that. So that's kind of what happened with Endeavor. We had started and stopped private sector a number of times. It would begin, it would end, some administrations would change, the support would change. So what we realized this time, and I know a lot of the folks on here are familiar with the Fleet Response Working Group. It is something that we've been involved in for a long time. And we kind of stole that idea and says, I have to be realistic. I believe in this. Our governor believes in this, but who knows what the next governor is going to believe in or what the next person is going to believe in. And we really need to pay attention to that. So we worked with our economic development folks who looked at the top, about 500 businesses in Pennsylvania that would have the biggest impact if they weren't here anymore, because that's really what it was about. In all honesty, part of it's selfish. We want businesses to survive, but we also want our citizens to have a place to work and a place to get goods and a place to get services. So we want businesses to survive. And quite frankly, I want them resilient, because when the lights come back on and Walmart and Kmart and all the other big box stores open, my life's easier and Mike's life's easier, and so is Brian's. It's a little selfish. So we talked to the governor, we had his support, and interesting enough, we had a kickoff meeting, and quite frankly, we used All Hazards. All Hazards did well with the Fleet Response Working Group. We brought them on board for a while. Says, Tom, we need to get this done. I want to use that same model. You're interested in doing it. And how do we do it right? Well, the way we did it right was the initial meeting that the group that ended up becoming the Endeavor meeting was in the governor's residence. We went there, we brought them all in there. We talked to the major businesses in Pennsylvania. And remember, we're the Keystone State. We have a lot of transportation businesses, a lot of warehouse businesses in Pennsylvania. So we're also not really good at sometimes keeping people moving, and they get stuck for times on the road. So that was a big interest to folks. And what happened from that is we now have an Endeavor group that's, probably 600 or so strong. We haven't quite caught Persia yet, but we're working on it. And this group is not run by government. It's not run by Pennsylvania. There's a charter, there's a membership, and it is run by the private sector. We support it. We absolutely, Molly Doherty is our private sector integration person, our PBOC director. When we're activated, Mike talks about having his operations folks and having the BEOC there. We took that from you, Mike, in Persia. We knew that you did that. It made sense to us. And one of the, when we talked to businesses, one of the things I show them is an executive leadership briefing that's going on, and Molly is at that table. And she is out there representing the business community. Right now in COVID, we're putting out 2 reports a day, every day, to the business community. And all I hear is good things about the information they're getting, because it's one place to go. They know it's vetted information. It's not, it's not tainted in any way by anyone's opinions. It is real facts. So they appreciate that. So that is the Endeavor program. The group, we're kind of keeping up with them at this point in time, because they are really doing phenomenal things. They've run some tabletops, they've run some exercises, and they have really been doing well. And hopefully when, when I am gone and there's a new governor, the Endeavor Group is going to be here, and the government's going to have no choice to be part of it. And that's what we wanted to cement in, that this keeps going, because it's just so important. Our relationship with private sector, they can do things that we can't do. They can do a lot of things better than us. And like Mike, we took the approach, we're not going to ask for anything. We're not going to come to business and ask them for things. We're going to find out what they need from us in terms of information so they can do their job better. And that's really worked well for us. And like Mike, I could talk for probably the next 2 weeks about this, but I am going to stop and give someone else a chance.
No, sir, you're just getting warmed up, and I'm going to swing back to you. So don't worry at all. Don't worry about that. Director Hastings, you with us?
Persia.
Yes, sir. Well, 2020, we know it not only was the pandemic here, but was a record hurricane year. And that especially impacted Alabama with Hurricanes Sally and Zeta. Can you share your perspectives regarding the private sector on those events?
I will. And before I get into that, I thank you to both Jeff and Mike for, stating some of the things that hold true, is that government, we don't run programs well, we don't really solve problems well, we're part of the problem. And sometimes the best thing we can do is just get out of the way and let the private sector do what they do best, which is innovate and come up with cool solutions. So I'm going to go into some statistics from Alabama. And then for those folks who aren't from Alabama, when I tell you some of these things, you may go, well, maybe Alabama doesn't have a lot of disasters and they're not emergency prone or disaster prone or all hazards prone, but we're a coastal county, we're region 4. And if there's something that's always happens in region 4, it's on the pointy edge of hurricanes and disasters all the time. And, we're dealing with one right now in Jefferson County in Birmingham with a tornado that, killed one and injured about 20 plus. And if there's a silver lining, Jefferson County is one of the most, capable counties. In fact, it is the most capable county in Alabama with regard to task force and fire department, volunteer fire departments, and law enforcement. So they're really, really good. But Alabama, notwithstanding 2020, we were 7th worst in disasters. I don't know what we are now. So it's active. And then 2020 was also, we've had 10% of all our major disaster declarations in that year since 1961. And then something that I don't like to say is that since I took this job in 2017, we've had about 15% of all our disasters since 1961. So when I got here, I was like, wow, is it always like this in Alabama? And it's not, but it has been. And I hope that's not a sign of things to come, but it feels like we're always in operations and response, and we're still in like 18 disaster recoveries. That's incredible. And we're not as big and cool as North Carolina. We're a little smaller, 6th poorest state in the nation, number 1 in tornado deaths, number 1 in annual tornado deaths. And it's really interesting place to live and be an emergency manager. So Hurricane Sally, right? Just recently, it became the 3rd largest individual assistance disaster in Alabama history. It just surpassed the 2011 tornadoes with 253 deaths. Now, we didn't have that many deaths in Sally, but that Cat 2 that was very, very slow moving, like 3 mile to 5 mile an hour across a few counties in Alabama, dumped up to 30 inches of rain in some parts. It was 29.99 inches because the National Weather Service couldn't give us that another thousandths of an inch. We had 350,000 people without power. And the individual assistance portion of that disaster has approached $340 million, which we just didn't expect that, but it has. And so in those components of Sally, and we call it the federal individual assistance, $89 million of that is in individual and housing programs, which go like money to individuals to help them with immediate repairs, rental, and maybe assistance in some living stuff. $140 million went to small business associations. When you think, or administration loans, when you think of small business, most people think of small businesses, which is appropriate for this audience that we're talking to, the private sector. However, in the SBA loans, that also goes to individuals and small businesses. So that helps people build their homes back if they need assistance, if they don't have all the insurance for it, and also helps them add on mitigation measures to that. And then also in that $340 million is about $108 million in National Flood Insurance Program. So overall, this disaster is going to end up being about $550 to $600 million, of which, we'll pay a fair share of that in Alabama, but that's a large disaster. That's not North Carolina large, but for Alabama, that's a big disaster. And so inside of this disaster, if you start unpacking this, and as an astrophysics guy, science guy, I love the data, and trying to talk through the interconnectedness, which the panel prior to this kind of talked about, the collisions of cylinders of excellence and our different functions, is that Baldwin and Mobile counties, the counties that are most impacted by Sally, are actually the most fortified counties in the US and in Alabama. And that's 18,000 fortified homes. It's not that we have the best codes, and we may not have the most strengthened or strong homes and buildings, but for the fortified program, which is a specific program, South Carolina and North Carolina are second and third, and Alabama is number one. So we've done some good work in the coast, but we're trying to expand that program. And I'll get into a philosophy here in a second about that. But could you imagine if on the front side of this, the mitigation and the preparedness side, if we could have partnered with federal, state, local, tribal governments and private companies and associations. And the only thing I love more than associations is associations of associations, because it really allows a community to come together with a powerful voice to get things done. And to partner and fund some of these fortified home grants and efforts. And the problem is with federal funds is that if you want to fortify 1,000 homes, we in Alabama, and I'm sure North Carolina and South Carolina and all the states would love this, is just to get the federal money, some money, a block of money, and then the states and the local communities work to divvy that out to people who want to fortify their homes or fortify their buildings, their structures, like private companies or small businesses and things like that. And then it made me think, and I'm going to partner with the Mitigation Council, and I'll talk about that here in a second, to figure out how can we take a look at the $340 million we spent in recovery funds. If we would have spent just a portion of that, and maybe it works out to be the 4-to-1, 6-to-1 return on investment of mitigation dollars on the front side to mitigate those homes. Because when you look at the God's eye view of Baldwin and Mobile County, you'll see the homes that are fortified have their roofs on them. And 75% of the homes that lose their roof are the ones with flood damage and are destroyed or have major damage inside. So if we could have kept more roofs on more homes, what percentage of that $340 million would have been reduced? And what does that return on investment look like? And so what we're not doing well is kind of what both Mike and Jeff were talking about, is we don't have a charter, we don't have an umbrella structure in Alabama that's kind of giving a vision and a strategy of where we want the private sector to go for a business operations center. But we enjoy very, very strong partnerships with associations and those components of what a business operations center would look like. So we're not where they need to, where they are and where we need to be, but we have the ingredients. And so this Mitigation Council is one of the things that we enjoy in Alabama, is we have a close relationship with our Center for Advanced Public Safety, which is a kind of a behavioral science, risk and messaging center at the University of Alabama. We've got a risk management Alabama, Department of Insurance. We love our commissioner, Jim Ridling, Home Builder, Smart Home Alabama, and Strengthen Alabama Homes. And that council, we're trying to create a structure where maybe we can allow the private sector, the insurance industry, to take a look at that, to see if it's in the best interest of the insurers and the locals to invest in preparedness and mitigation, because it makes perfect sense. And then this would be a great case to show that. The problem is, one of the things that we're not good sometimes in government is after action reports, and really freezing the stick and trying to look back to how we could have done better, and then making sure that we inculcate that and formalize it so we do better in the future. And with COVID on top of it, more tornadoes, and we're going into our tornado season, which is actually 1 January to 31 December in Alabama. We have to take a pause and put some time and effort to the front side of these. And the other thing that was interesting about Sally is that we spent about $3 million of state money in commodities like tarps and MREs in response to Hurricane Sally. We purchased 36,000 tarps, and these are big tarps, right, in total. That includes the FEMA stuff that we asked for, and then our state contracts. And we bought from our vendors, and the federal government buys from their vendors. Well, what if we had a business operations center that had real-time information of the health of that the emergency management component of the private sector, and showed the health of those commodities that we use? Because what happened here is that we had that information. We were calling, it's kind of a pickup game, and we knew that people, these local mom pops and the big ones, your Lowe's, your Home Depot, and your Ace Hardware, in some cases were swimming in tarps. But problem is, people didn't have the time to ask, or if they called someone, didn't have the information, no one knew where they were. So in that confusion and chaos of the response, when things are happening and there's 35,000 people without power, there was no collection of that information to know what was in the system. So this is what we do. And I almost want to give an apology to the private sector on this one, right? So we spent $3 million, and these are state dollars plus some federal dollars, right? In which a portion of that could have been put back into these affected communities, right? So ultimately, by going outside the local community to buy these commodities, we increased our state disaster costs. Now, nothing went to waste, because whatever was left over from this, it's going and being pre-positioned for tornadoes up north, hurricanes in the south. It's going to happen. We eliminated a portion of our local sales to the private companies, the local economy, and then the collection of local and state sales taxes, which people are suffering at the local level anyway because of COVID-19 and the reduction of tourism on the coast, while partially crowding out the local economy and reducing some in-kind volunteer offsets to our FEMA match. Now, what that means is that when you do things like feed people, we bought a lot of MREs, and people have these volunteer spirit, which could be private or public or non-governmental, that offsets the state costs. We had a triple whammy. So I wish that we had better visibility, better connectivity at the local level with that local enterprise. We had a county location, a staging location, where we were shipping the commodities we bought that was 3 miles away from a regional warehousing and distribution center of one of the big home improvement companies. And it's amazing that the local community and counties didn't use any of that stuff. And that's where we need to get to, because private industry plays a large role in this, right? If the local economy is growing and the money is flowing, then the recovery is going. And so, I'm a public servant, and I believe public service is love, and where I am, I build community. So I want to use words that are honest, but also constructive, and shows where we have weaknesses and where we need to go. But, at the same time, I want everyone to know that a prepared employee is a present employee. A prepared employer is an employer that can employ prepared employees. And so if your community is prepared, we need to show people that mitigation and preparedness is good business, it's good for business, and it's a good investment. It makes sense for everyone to get together to make sure that we're building a community that when a disaster hits, we shake off some debris, we get in our cars and we go to work, because we build stronger together and we're connected together. And if 70% of our economy in the state is small businesses, and they're the most susceptible to disasters, it's going to take us all working together to show the benefits of that mitigation and preparedness, to show that that's what resiliency is all about. And so that's kind of my perspective on, the looking back at Sally and what we could have done better. And I appreciate just hearing from Mike and Jeff and the things that you guys are doing by leading the way, and you, Persia, because you have an example that people are trying to attain when it comes to business operations center. So thank you, Persia. I appreciate that question.
Well, Dr. Hastings, or Director Hastings, here's the thing. It sounds like you're kind of segueing into a question that was coming up later about your strategy for the private sector, because it sounds like you're kind of building on your observation, looking at what you did right, doing well the after action review, and looking at your particular strategies. And maybe it seems like you have a lot of ideas there all over right now, but I'm going to go to Director Thomas and then to Director Sprayberry about that strategy in the private sector. If you have one for future, what you're thinking about, especially with Director Hastings' issues in mind, the things that he's thinking about what he wants to do, because it seems like such a big project to try to get your arms around. Director Thomas?
So I think it is a big project, but I think it's, it's like an elephant. It's one bite at a time, right? You put one foot in front of the other. So our strategy is really to continue what we're doing, because I think that's working. We're getting more and more businesses involved. I think the work that the BEOC and Molly did over the pandemic has really shown people what this can be and the advantages of being part of it. And I think that we need to expand that. One of the things that we want to do is try to partner with the businesses for maybe some messaging, and maybe, Director Hastings said something that I absolutely agree with. A prepared employee is a present employee, a prepared business is a present business. It goes back to what I said originally about being a little selfish. I want people to be able to go to work. I want the economy to go. So one of the things that we've talked about in Pennsylvania and about in businesses in particular is, and this is, everyone has things that they pick up on. I am a data guy, just like Brian. I pay attention to the data because I really want to know what's driving where we go. We're not a tornado-prone state like Brian is, but we're certainly a flood-prone state. We have as much riverine miles as we do highway miles in Pennsylvania, and we have a lot of highway miles. And those of us that have been around for a while, know just what a great job that the NFIP has done over the years in marketing. We have put that message out there. Hey, if you live near a floodplain, if you're in the floodplain, you need to insure your risk. You really need to make sure it's done. We do that for businesses. We do it for homeowners. The problem is, in North Carolina, as far as I'm concerned, has the best website that I've ever seen in terms of businesses and homeowners to figure out what their risk truly is and where they are in that. I am absolutely jealous, Mike, of the work you've done. I know the investment you put in it. It took a long time and it's not easy. But
that would be the Fiman. You mean our Fiman website?
Yep, it is an amazing product. But that's what we need, and that's what we need our businesses to do, and also talk to their staff about. So for 50 years, we did a great job. If you live near the floodplain, make sure you buy insurance. Pretty simple. The difference is that we never changed our message when the flood events changed. I don't care why it's flooding more. You pick your political, you make that decision. We're consequence managers. What I care about is the consequences. And the truth is, back to Brian being data, over the last 4 decades, what's happened is there's been a 74% increase in heavy rain events in northeastern United States. That's Pennsylvania. That's a huge increase. That's 2 inches of rain in 2 hours, right? Or in one day. The other thing that's happened with this is that we went back to 1993 and took a look at where floods are happening in Pennsylvania. And over 90% of our floods since 1993 happened outside of floodplains. So that is the message that we have really been driving. And talk about partnerships with our insurance industry, partnerships with the real estate and the banking industry have really grown because we want to help. We want them to help us with this message. And that's the next push for businesses. We want businesses to pay close attention to where they might want to insure some of their potential losses related to natural disasters, right? That's really what we're talking about. And also help their employees pay attention to those things. So we think it's a message that not just the real estate community, the banking community, the insurance community can help us with. We think it's a message that all businesses can help us with, because better prepare businesses, we all know the stats. You don't come back in the first 24, 48 hours, you're losing all the time in terms of the percentages for whether you're going to be able to recover or not if you're a small business. So we want people, if you can't mitigate it by moving things, by physical hazards, we want you to insure your risk so that you are sure to come back and remain a business that we really want in the Commonwealth. So that's our next step in terms of where we're going.
Thank you, sir. And Director Sprayberry, your strategic plans for the private sector, have you thought about that? I have, but I want to hear yours.
Oh my goodness. I think the king is dead, long live the king. So sure, I mean, we're always thinking about, what's the next steps. Obviously, I've told you many times that the program continues to grow, and we're very excited about that. I liked what you were just saying, Jeff, about helping get the word out about businesses, because frankly, there are no recovery programs for businesses. I mean, you either have insurance or you don't. And so I think that's a strong message to put out there. And, talking about floods in North Carolina, we talk about floods all the time because that's our number one risk. Our number one risk are floods created by some tropical system. And so what we're doing here in North Carolina is we continue to build our BEOC out. But I think what we're doing is, and I think what you are doing, Persia, is, you're starting something new called the sector analysis, where your private partners are contributing information that's sector specific. They don't have to identify their company, but they get to share their concerns, operational issues, expectations on supply chain, workforce challenges, expectations, challenges, limitations, anything that's impacted their operations, not just during COVID, but anytime. And so you've said that that's been helpful in the decision making. So we want to make sure that we're getting really ground truth, what's happening, and we want to get that information regularly. So we're currently getting information about food, groceries, transportation, logistics, health, the workforce, banking, pharmacy, lots of different things. I know you're sending out your reports to your partners as well. And so I think understanding their problems basically helps, us know what we can anticipate coming down the road. I got to tell you that Persia's BEOC briefing is part of what I brief every day to the governor at 10 o'clock on my COVID brief. So moving on into the future, some of the things that I'm focused on is that in WebEOC, we have a board where our partners can basically put what types of things that they would like to offer up during any event. We don't tell them what to put. It's their decision. And it basically provides a menu. And so when a resource request comes in from a county, it can get chopped over to logistics. It can get chopped over to operations. It can get chopped over to business EOC to fill that resource request. I think that's critical. And another thing that they're doing in the COVID environment is we have non-congregate sheltering, which frankly is a bear to work through, especially with large numbers. And so how does that work out? And so, actually Persia and her team, working with human services and our WebEOC team, have built a board inside of WebEOC so that people can be directed to specific hotels. And they get there, and we've got an agreement with the American Red Cross, their hotel managers at those hotels, and they can get food provided there. So Persia, why don't you elaborate a little bit? I'm very proud of that. You guys did a great job.
Thanks, sir. The non-congregate sheltering program, it really was it was an 18-month program that we condensed into about 4 months, because with the pandemic going on and we are in North Carolina, not really sure what was going to happen. So watching Sally, Director Hastings, and watching Zeta, watching the huge evacuations in Louisiana really put a fire, at least under me, that what are we going to do with all of these people? So in 30 seconds, what we looked at obviously were the folks, the typical people that you want to talk to. We looked at the hotel folks, and we looked at these people that, Expedia and all of these people that do this travel. I wasn't trying to learn hotel management, but it occurred to me that maybe we could build our own. So in short, what we did was build a microsite so that they could handle the strain of the 250 plus hotel partners that jumped on board with us, and they could put information in. We could start at, say, D-8 or whenever we were watching the hurricane on their availability. We came up with a nice agreement with them. They are great partners, allowing us 3-day courtesy, which is huge when we're trying to figure out what we're doing, what those demand signals are. And then that microsite aggregates that information, all those rooms, all those hotels into WebEOC, because our servers, it's questionable whether or not we could handle another 300 hotel users. So, because the BEOC alone, we're over 600 users. So at any rate, it allows the boss at a glance to see what hotels, where, how many rooms, kinds of rooms, ADA, pet friendly. It's very detailed. And so at this point, we're happy to say that we've got access to about 25,000 rooms across our member hotels. And they've been very, very kind to us, and they've agreed to state rates, 3-day courtesy holds, and I'm happy to share that MOA with you.
So you see how calmly she states all that, and just like, well, nothing to it. And so, but I gotta say, it's like it was a major, major project for the team. And I mean, it's just incredible the work that was done. And I think under the leadership of Persia, I mean, it's just incredible. Because obviously, like you guys, we still have to figure out, congregate sheltering as well in a COVID environment. So we want to really take what she just described, and continue to refine it, because while we're sitting here in our seats and everything's fine, and well, maybe not in Alabama, but as far as a hurricane, we want to make sure that when it actually does happen, that we can execute. And so we had it up and running, and we did start to execute it, but then as it turned out, there weren't a whole lot of people that actually evacuated, which I'm not complaining, right? Not complaining at all. But one of the things that we wanted to do is to make sure that when it comes the next time, and there's going to be a next time, that we're ready to rock and roll. And I got to tell you, as we move through the COVID pandemic, I don't think we're going to see us in a good place until not 21, but maybe 22. And so and I got to also say this, and I don't mean to be a harbinger of doom or anything like that, but this is one pandemic. Will there be others? And so we're learning from it. And so that's what I want to do is, my guys are making fun of me because we have an annual statewide exercise here at Emergency Management. So they asked me, well, what do you want to do? We continue to do hurricane exercises. We continue to do this and that. Let's do something new. And I said, no, I want to do a hurricane exercise with an overarching pandemic. And they said, well, we're doing the pandemic now. Let's do something different. I said, I don't care. Because let me tell you something, when the flag's up and you see that hurricane come roaring at you, we got to be ready with all of our private sector partners. And I cannot overemphasize how operational they have become for us. I mean, it is just incredible. And so, I mean, you know, they're continuously providing us with resources that, quite frankly, FEMA doesn't have, the state doesn't have. They're provided by private sector, and they're glad to do it, right? They don't ask for anything in return. You know, the partnership that we built is like this. If just allowing them to participate, they get excited to do it, right? More excited. I mean, it's incredible. And they're very genuine and very sincere. And also they're super smart. They're the ones that come up with the solutions. And so just really, you know, grateful to have them on board. I want to talk about Hurricane Isaias. Are we moving? Can I talk
Yes,
about
sir,
that
you
for a
may.
second?
No, you may.
And so that was our first time that we responded to a hurricane virtually. I had about maybe 5 people in the EOC, where usually I'd have about 250 to 300. And so was I worried? I would say yes. I was worried about, you know, the crash of our IT system, which if that had happened, I mean, that would have been something. But since our private, and then I'm just going to talk about private partners right now, we were effective. Our private partners had access to Web EOC, that to include the private sector common operating picture. So they were aware of all the briefings. They could see the real-time resource request and significant events, and they were posting themselves. They had open communications with all the sectors. They answered resource requests, deployed, you know, equipment and force packages just like normal, just like they always do. And they did it all virtually. And for the first time, Persia says, we shared our unmanned aerial vehicle information. They could access our pictures from drones flown by NOAA right after the hurricane, straight out of Web EOC, so they can see the impacts themselves. And why is that important? That's important because many of our private sector partners, they either have businesses in the impacted area, or they have the type of businesses that rolls through those areas. And so they get to see all that real time. It was very exciting for them. Very, you know, we were honored to be able to provide it for them. Back to you, Persia.
Well, thanks, sir. I want to ask Director Thomas something. You know, you guys have had winter storms, and to me, Pennsylvania, I mean, I think you guys are going to be the kings of winter storms. How you handle them, the information that you have gleaned from talking to the private sector and decreasing accidents and those kinds of things. I want to ask you, is there anything that you wish you had? Is there something else the private sector can do to enhance that operation? Because, I mean, as the Keystone State, you guys are also, you know, kind of like the gateway to, you know, everything east. And I know the transportation is huge for you. So talk to me about what you need from the private sector, or you wish you had, or your dreams that you had. And I want to give this group a chance to hear what that is.
So Persia, thank you. And you're right. We one of our successes has really been the partnership with the private sector to try to come up with a middle ground from people being stuck on roadways for 24, 48 hours. You know, I've told this story a lot of times, and we've had folks that have passed away in stuck queues. We have babies that have been born, and I joke, probably babies conceived, right? Because we've had people stuck in for a long time. And I also am very well aware, again, from the data of what it costs the transportation industry to have trucks sit. It is not cheap. It is not something we want to have happen. So one of our successes, excuse me, early on was a partnership with the private sector to really look at how can we do this better? Where is that fine line between, we just can't let everybody run. We can't take the chances. You know, it is not the commercial vehicles that are causing accidents, but we all know when you're snowing 3 inches an hour and they're stuck for 3 hours, you're not moving them. it's not like a car you can move. It takes forever to move them, causing problems. So we partnered with them. We have a framework that turned into a policy. And I think the private sector was surprised at the openness that we came to the table with of, here are our ideas. We don't run these businesses. We really want to know the impacts. We are eventually going to make the decision. That's our job as government, but we really want your input. So they were really good with that. We've come up with a good framework. We do phased restrictions. And our commitment to them was we weren't going to do this and forget about it. So when we do restrictions, we have decision makers in the EOC from state police, Department of Transportation, Emergency Management, and the Turnpike Commission. And we have our neighboring states on the phone. And we make decisions. Yep, we're going to take this off. We're going to put this on right then and there. That doesn't go anywhere else. It's done right there. So we're able to remove restrictions, move commerce as fast as we can, and at the same time protect our citizens that are out on the road. So that was one thing that really worked. The other thing that you talked about, and I'm getting to your question honestly about what we would like from private sector. How about I tell you what we've gotten from private sector that I never expected, because it amazes me, and it is my opportunity to take this chance to thank them. I know there's some folks on there from Pennsylvania, but I don't think it matters where you're from. So COVID early on, every one of us were struggling for PPE. Where do we get it? How do we take care of our healthcare workers? Plus, there were a lot of people that wanted to sell you anything you could think of that maybe thought they knew somebody that could maybe get you somebody in somebody's backyard, and all of these things. So we went to our private sector and says, listen, any of you manufacturers that can help us, we really can use help. The governor did it. It was an open call. We talked to a few big ones, big suppliers. And before you knew it, we set up a web portal. So like you, Persia, we were having so much response, we needed a place to put it. And we have had so many businesses that have pivoted their manufacturing and turned it into making PPE, face shields, masks, other things that we couldn't get anywhere else. That has just been such a tremendous outpouring from our businesses, and then donating things. I mean, we have a lot of 5 gallons of hand sanitizer. We have nothing like Kentucky, but we do have some alcohol producers in Pennsylvania. So the Alcohol Producers Association, the distillers, started making hand sanitizer and things that you would never expected. It became so well done that we created a business-to-business portal out of that. And so what we have now is we have suppliers and manufacturers teaming directly up with business on a business-to-business portal, helping each other. And 2 of them just hooked up not too long ago to develop a new kind of a replacement for an N95 mask that if it goes someplace is really going to be pretty cool. But that outpouring from businesses that we never asked, we asked them, can you help? We were amazed at the response and humbled, quite frankly, by the response, and very appreciative of it. So I think as we move forward, I think if we learn anything in government is, and Mike said this a few times and Brian has said it, we need to realize that we are not the big dog here when it comes to technology, when it comes to logistics, when it comes to being able to harness and do things effectively and efficiently. So I'm thinking that our ask is going to be more and more from them of, hey, come to the table and talk to us about this. This is our idea. It's really your industry. Before we, you know how it is. We want people to have pride and authorship in what they design and what they develop. We want all of our staff to do that. So if I give this to a team of government folks and they develop what they think is the absolute best policy in the world, it's hard for me to back up and change direction in that. It's much easier if I bring together private sector and my developers and we have a listening session with private sector so that we're not building something we think is right and then having to change it. So that is really what I'm looking for, is more front-end discussion with private sector in those big areas where they are, quite frankly, better than we are at that particular endeavor.
No, thank you, sir. So we've got front-end discussions, right? More collaborations,
Yeah, I would say more collaboration and more, you know, on our part, on government's part, a better understanding that we need to be able to have those conversations on the front end of starting to develop policies and procedures.
I'm gonna allow Director Hastings to jump in, sir. Anything from the private sector that you wish you had that you hadn't mentioned? Coordination, technology, any capability, especially this past season, hurricane season?
No, thank you, Gracia. I'm gonna take a step back to go forward, like an Alabama two-step. But in these conversations and listening to my contemporaries and the other directors here, and following your lead, Persia, some of the things that we need to think about in Alabama moving forward is really elevate the support and visibility of the importance of a business operations center. So if it doesn't have more of my attention and potentially the governor's staff, whether it's a chief or someone talking about it and maybe leading the effort, it just sometimes can't get that momentum. And we have a great commissioner of commerce, secretary of commerce, Greg Canfield, and he's done just marvelous things with the transition of local businesses in Alabama. And also, we're now the third largest auto manufacturer. And when you have California going, why can't we be more like Alabama with regard to business environment? That's something that's unexpected, quite frankly. The other thing is that just listening to Jeff and Mike talk is that you need to incentivize through the framework, the development, and the management of this business operations center, so that the businesses, private community build their own system that works for business, solves problems that are important to business, yet are aligned with state mitigation preparedness goals for business community resilience, which they shouldn't be incompatible. They should be completely compatible. And then the other thing that I think we've all recognized is that we are part of the problem. As a member of the bureaucracy, a person in the government, we should all wake up every morning, look in the mirror and go, I am part of the problem. And what am I going to do today to be a part of the solution? And I think that's probably the first step in trying to think outside your cylinder of excellence. So some of the questions you kind of asked us to think about, and I really appreciated, the prep that we did going into this and kind of the evolution of some of the questions we were going to think about and answer. But, one observation, there's little has changed under the sun, right? So as the more things have changed, I have to admit my perception and observations of human behavior, politics, and government has kind of stayed stagnant. Where I thought COVID-19 would act as an accelerant, and it has, because from the start of this, much like Mike, you talked about, there was some consternation about going totally virtual, but I loved it. I'm like, why do we have to be in a hole 200 feet underground in the middle of Alabama, furthest away from any workforce, to manage a disaster on the coast? It doesn't make any sense to me. It should be, if we truly, as emergency managers and people in the emergency management community, the enterprise, which includes private industry and businesses, we should all think, where I am, I build community. Where I am, I build connection. Where I am, I build social cohesion. And we don't need to do that in a hole in the middle of Alabama. We could actually do it from wherever we are, and using those tools in creative manners to connect with anyone. And so there are some downsides of the lack of human connection, the lack of being face-to-face with someone. But in Zoom, MS Teams, fill in the blank with other type of WebEx and other IT systems that allow you to connect with many people, it has actually opened some opportunities. So instead of being a change agent, I kind of look at this global pandemic as an accelerant of things that I would have liked to see anyways in emergency management. It's interesting that on the 19th of March last year, I sent out a note, and I won't tell you who I sent it to, but when the majority of states kind of shut down for a little bit, I was like, hey, let's use this 2 weeks to proactively message and take this as a strategic pause to rethink and retool everything in government and everything in our businesses and how we deliver services in a creative way to minimize the spread of COVID, but still do all those things that we need to do, the economy, educate, provide services. And I don't know if we did that. You know, there's a part of me that goes, and I agree with you, Miguel Sprayberry, I agree with you. This is not ending as soon as you get your shot. And because it's slow, the rollout is slow. I'm hoping, you know, if I'm an optimist, that we will be much better this summer. But there's a part of me that says 2022 this is going to linger into that next year. You know, there's a part of me that wants to say, let's use all those good habits that we created last March to help weather the storm as we try to, you know, maximize and get the volume of vaccines out to vaccinate our people. Because without the vaccine, and hopefully that this disease doesn't mutate, because the faster it spreads, the faster it mutates. If we could have done that first step of all our strategies, and I believe probably North Carolina and Pennsylvania's strategy is similar to ours. The first step was slow the spread of COVID-19, slow the spread of the coronavirus. I don't know if we've done that as best as we can. So there's something at the messaging and the human behavior part of this that hasn't changed, and that's the blessing and curse of a democracy, right? There's no other place I'd rather be. I love this country, but democracies are messy. So I believe that's a constant that we have. I am as an A-10 pilot, I love destroying things. And you've already heard my take on government is that sometimes we get in the way. So I don't like blowing things up all the time, but I wish our grants and the federal mechanisms were a little bit better across our functions and the services that we deliver at all levels of government. And what I'm trying to say is that we are a product and the siblings of the color of the money and the agency that funds us. To the point that I have conversations with my state partners where they're talking about emergency preparedness, emergency management activities, and saying they can't partner with us because no, that's emergency preparedness for medical and not emergency management FEMA. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we just said that. I thought we were in the same family, but we're not. And so the 19 to 20 disparate funding mechanisms from those federal agencies that are active during disasters create cylinders of excellence that do not talk to each other, do not collaborate, do not coordinate as well as we should. And it's these opportunities with you, the private industry, the business community, the folks that don't have those ties to funding mechanism, because our organization is 57%, and it's gotten better. We used to be 67%, 57% funded by disaster grants, which means that 67% of all our activities are focused backwards as we try to plan moving forward. So that makes no sense to me. So if states want emergency management agencies and the enterprise to look forward to the future, to the vision where all the value is, it's tough to do it when we go to bed every night praying for disasters, because that's how we fund our agencies. Think through that for a second. So if we could untether some of these grants to create these collisions of these functions and cylinders of excellence, it's those intersections of the disciplines of who we are and what we do, where innovation and creativity occurs and we solve problems that are complex. So I think we could do that better, and that starts at the top. And for the private industry, I think I would like to see, and it requires trust, I want to invite them into our fold so they can see the things that Mike Sprayberry and Jeffrey was talking about. This is what's going on. This is how this disaster is playing out, how the life cycle of it is, and how it's affecting across all government services and functions of Alabama. At the same time, I would like to see, with trust, a little bit more of the private sector and what's available, and connect the private sector with those local communities in a more intimate way where they can reach out and do things together. And we don't have that yet. We're pretty good with the volunteers and VOADs, the volunteers active in disasters, but we're not as close as we should be with our business partners. And I think if the more we look at each other as members of the same family, the emergency management enterprise, the mitigation resilience, the investment enterprise, I think the better we'll be in the future. So that's kind of some of the ways I look through my role as the emergency management director in Alabama. as we move forward to try to just make us better. Thanks, Persia. Or thanks.
Well, sir, no, we all, I know this audience will agree with me, would like to hear your philosophies. You know, you're getting known for those, your observations and then philosophical points of what we can do better in emergency management. So we appreciate that. We do. I think that I want to pull back or go forward rather to give each of you guys a talk about your lessons learned, give you a chance to talk about that. Also to spin on what Director Hastings just talked about. I mean, I'd like to get your opinions about what he said. I mean, this untethering of grants and that kind of thing. It sounds from a governance standpoint, maybe a little scary, but you know, I like pushing the envelope. So I want to see your opinions on that, sir.
I don't know, Brian, are you actually from Alabama? That's just a question.
I'm
But
from northern Alabama, the Chicagoland area. It's up out down I-55 a little bit. So.
right. So what you're saying, I think Jeff and I understand what you're talking about with being funded by grants. You know, we have a lot of folks that are funded by disaster grants here in North Carolina, but we keep having lots of disasters. So what we're really seeing here is people not working really fast because they'll slow it down because they worry that, you know, if they work themselves out of a job. So, but what we've been able to do is get more funding from the state to help us mitigate that situation. I will say that right before this call, I was on a call with the GAO and I was recommending an interagency council for all federal agencies that have a recovery program. And I said that it needed to have some horsepower so that when they spoke, they were listened to. And I also spoke about equity, and I also spoke about a bigger role for the private sector. So I will tell you that the new administration is looking to make some changes, as you probably might imagine. So I don't think we have a whole lot of time, and I want to get Jeff on here, but before I do, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. I remembered something about Pennsylvania, and there's a bank up there called, I think it's called, oh goodness gracious, hold on a second, Orrstown Bank. That sound right? And so Persia worked with Orrstown Bank and our North Carolina Banking Association to get a 53-foot trailer of donations, tractor trailer, delivered to southeastern North Carolina after Florence. And that's an example of states working together, private sector working. And just wanted to tell you, thank you, brother. And thank you, ma'am. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeffrey.
Mike, you're welcome. And one of the things we are blessed with in Pennsylvania is, and would frequent that bank, you know, in the location is, we have a large Amish community, Plain people community, and Mennonite community, and they are just so involved in helping people. So we are blessed with that here. We really are. You know, I see we're running up on time. I appreciate your comments, Mike and Brian. I think we're all on the same page. Trying to look at the color of money is something that I've spent a long career doing, like most of us have. It makes no sense sometimes, especially if you come from business. You just look at it and say, this makes no sense whatsoever. I think that the idea of all of the different acronym agencies that have a recovery function being part of a council is a phenomenal idea, Mike. I really think that is a great idea. And I think that we can only get better if we look at things that way. But again, I think moving forward, there's a lot to do. I know that as we look forward, I want to do exactly what Brian says. We are also, some of our folks are funded by disasters like everyone else. We've done pretty good with state funding. We've also done pretty good at leveraging all other kind of funds we can find. But moving forward, and resiliency and mitigation is really something that we're going to put a lot of effort to. We just did some reorganization. We created a resilience officer. I forget exactly the title. I should know it. I wrote it, kind of resilience and risk management officer. He's going to work in our recovery division because I think that can go a long way. And I also, mitigation is important. I mean, our good friend Russ Strickland, his favorite saying is mitigation is the center of the universe. We've all heard him say that. And I think the more we can do, as Brian says, to look forward and learn from, we don't want to look to our last disaster to decide what should we do for the next disaster, right? We really want to look forward. We don't want to repeat what has happened this time. We want to do better next time. So I think that's good advice for all of us, Brian. I think it's good advice for business, looking forward as opposed to, yeah, we did it this way and, maybe we'll change it a little bit. All of us have learned so much during this COVID response. All of us have. And if we've learned one thing that I want to take away from this is we've learned to be more agile than we have ever been. Changing virus, changing information from the federal government, changing strategies. And I've had many talks with a lot of our staff saying, listen, you need to be agile. You need to just take it in stride that, yep, they said something last week and it's different this week. You can either focus on that, spend a lot of energy on it, or just accept it, that this is an agile crisis planning event that we are in, and that's how we have to attack it.
Gentlemen, this has been awesome. I think that I could probably steal another 30 seconds from our host at the All Hazards Consortium. And I want to get one from you, one gem of wisdom. Brian Hastings.
One gem of wisdom. This is going to be simple, and it's less about philosophy, and it's a simple question. It's one that I think we need to ask based on what drives a lot of our disaster costs in America. And it reminded me of something that both Mike and Jeff were talking about is, it's one thing to be in the floodplain, but I think I'm not trying to sell insurance. Let me be very clear. But when it comes to disaster preparedness, insurance and savings, if you want to recover on your own timeline, that is key. And so a better question for individuals and businesses to ask themselves, especially as these rain events are increasing in magnitude and periodicity, is, does it rain where you live? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you need flood insurance. And I'll leave it there. It's very simple. It's fighter pilot stupid. And I am a fighter pilot. So it's a question that I can ask myself and answer. Thank you.
Flood insurance. Thank you, sir. Mike Sprayberry, one gem of wisdom, sir. One gem.
I would just ask all of the private sector partners that are participating here to reach out to your state emergency managers. And if you're not already part of the private sector team on the state emergency response team where you live, just reach out and join up. You'll be glad that you did. One team, one mission, one family.
Thank you, sir. Director Thomas, one gem of wisdom.
It's hard to follow those two great guys, but I have to say the best advice is you're going to meet your emergency manager or somebody from that organization. And if you have a disaster, don't wait till then. That is the best advice. Reach out, talk to them, get to know the folks because they will help you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to ask our audience to go ahead and put their questions in if they like, and I'll make sure you guys get those questions. Thank you. Wonderful.
Persia, thank you so much. To our panelists, thank you. This has been awesome. We appreciate you being here today. We're going to go ahead and take about a 5-minute break, and we'll start back up at 5 p.m. Eastern. So thanks again to our panelists, and we will see you guys back in 5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, sirs.